I want to thank everybody for joining us. If you don't know, my name is Nick Custer. I work for the Office of Economic Development and the EDA University Center for Community and Economic Development. We are a no cost to you business incubation and mentorship program that offers expert-led webinars every month to the campus and community throughout the seven county region. I'm very grateful today to be introducing the first session of our annual LLE series. We have worked in concert with the College of Arts and Sciences for the last 4 years to put together this series that kind of brings together interesting community and campus individuals that speak about those intersections of academia and entrepreneurship. And with that, I'd like to introduce our co-partner, the College of Arts and Science Associate Dean, Roy Barnes.
Thank you very much, Nick. I'd like to just begin, as Nick said, this is our 4th year. So hence we have LLE 4.0. And when I was thinking about liberal learning and entrepreneurship, it started back about 5 years ago when we were touring the what was going to be the Ferris wheel, and we were walking around with hard hats on and looking at the space. And David Olilla was talking about entrepreneurship, and he was talking about how entrepreneurship is, rooted in learning from failure. It's rooted in creativity. It's rooted in being able to solve complex problems. And the more he talked about it, the more I realized how very much entrepreneurialism and liberal learning is in fact very much related. And I think, as we'll see today in our conversation with the Chancellor, entrepreneurship, innovation, and liberal learning are very much intertwined. As this is our 4th in the series, LLE 4.0, it made me start thinking about the 4th Industrial Revolution. And so we are going to be framing this semester's series of talks around the concept of and the emergence of the 4th Industrial Revolution. This is the first and important framing of the series, but will be followed by a talk with the provost, Sanja Feast-Price, and the inaugural dean, Pearson, of the College of Innovation and Technology in March. And then in April, Dean Gano Phillips from the college will be talking about the 4th Industrial Revolution and our students. So I want to thank the Chancellor very, very much for agreeing to participate in this first discussion. His background and expertise lends itself very well for giving us a great foundation for the series this semester. And with that, I will let him take the floor.
Well, thank you, Roy. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. It's a very interesting series that Nick referred to, that you guys have been that you started 3 years ago. So it is LLE 4.0 and the very nice synergy with Industry 4.0. The main thing that attracts me to events of this nature is the realization that UM-Flint is a regional public university. And as a regional public university, we do have a big responsibility for regional economic development. That's a part of our mission. And given the new office that we now have, the Office of Research and Economic Development, within which is the Office of Economic Development that Nick referred to, it's a very good structure for us to engage with state, federal, and industrial partners, not only through research and projects, but through events like this. So we bring people together, we have conversations, and we make everyone a part of this office office and the University of Michigan Flint's activities. And from there will come new opportunities in education, new opportunities to contribute to the economic development of the region, new research opportunities, and so forth. So very happy to be a part of it. And thank you for inviting me.
I think we're going to have a great conversation over the next hour. Just one bit of housekeeping before we launch into the discussion and conversation. Nick will be following the questions and answers. So if you have a question that comes to mind as we're talking through the various points, please submit your questions. And at the end of the sort of more formal presentation, we will take your questions in order. And then we plan to have, because this is a community event, because we're trying to engage stakeholders from across the university and across the region, we really want to encourage you to ask questions at the end of the session, the formal remarks, and really we can participate in a more much more broader dialogue. So submit your questions as they come to mind, save them to the end, however you wish to do it, but I am looking forward to this conversation. So, as this is the first in the series looking at the Fourth Industrial Revolution and liberal learning, Chancellor, if we may, I'd like to begin with some definitions and getting a clearer idea of the conceptual terrain that involves the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So, I guess most basically, what is the Fourth Industrial Revolution?
Yes, so this term has been in use about 5 years now, and it came from the book in 2016 that Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, he published, and then it has gotten a lot more traction. Basically, what he is saying, and it's his hypothesis, and a very compelling one, is that in certain periods, technologies emerge and combines in ways that impact society much more than incremental that we are often used to. You know, technological advancements get you a better this or a faster that and things of that nature. However, this one isn't that. And the revolution refers to a drastic and fundamental change in the way we live, work, and relate to one another. So industrial revolutions drive major transformations in society across the world. Now, this Christmas break, I started reading Jill Lepore's book, These Truths, A History of the United States. It's a thick book, and I've been taking my time, enjoying reading it, and I'm almost done. And the reason I bring it up is several times she refers to how industrial revolutions have been contemporaneous with broader social transformations in the US. It's very interesting how she writes about mechanization, industrialization, and the societal effects of that. So back to Schwab, he posits that we are at the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution, referring to the potential impact that emerging technologies of various kinds that will have on nearly the entire spectrum of human development, economics, social, health, politics, and global affairs. So it's a framework, the fourth industrial revolution, and frameworks have many benefits. It allows mainly in people in the policy sector, people who do social sciences and so forth, to understand where technology is headed such that the policies are not lagging, they are timely, because that's what the impact on society is. And for engineers and scientists and other folks in business and industry, it also helps to bring a consolidated, a high-level view of how these pieces interact. And the last thing I'll say is that industrial revolutions build on the previous. So fourth industrial revolution is clearly building on the third and the second and so forth in its scale, scope, and size. So it is quite natural that the fourth industrial revolution is unlike anything that humankind has seen or experienced in the past.
As a social scientist, I certainly appreciate how technological change has profound social, economic, political, ideological impacts on society. I just picking up on what you mentioned about the fourth industrial revolution, picking up on the previous ones, just to sort of set things in more in a historical perspective. Can you briefly describe what the prior three industrial revolutions are, just so that everybody's sort of on the same page and we can sort of really appreciate the arc of these transformations over time?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm in a good position to explain that because I've lived through all four of them, right? Just kidding, just kidding. Broadly speaking, industrial revolutions, they are referring to periods and process of change that essentially moved societies from agrarian and handicraft-based economy to one based on machines, manufacturing, automation, and now information. I mean, that's roughly what it is. As most of us know, first industrial revolution roughly is the period of 1760 to 1830. And it started in Britain and was pretty much confined to Europe. It was driven by new materials and steam power that led to the invention of the steam engine, which led to mechanical production. I mean, that's where it all started. The second industrial revolution is referring to the period 1870 leading up to the First World War. So 1914, 15 of that sort. And it was led by the establishment of mass production of consumer goods and weapons, driven by electricity and the assembly line, and the development of the internal combustion engine, which led to automobiles and airplanes and so forth. So one thing to note here, the effect of all of this, mainly the transportation, automobiles and airplanes, led to a faster pace of life that keeps getting faster and faster. So we are all living that. It's noteworthy that the American Industrial Revolution actually began in this period, the last 30 years of the 19th century, and the development of the transcontinental railroad leading to vast industrial growth, particularly in the steel industry, is well known. And Jill Report's book, she talks about that quite a bit. The third industrial revolution is from 70s, late 70s, all the way up to maybe 2010 or so forth. You know, these are not hard-coded numbers or something. Is the computer and digital revolution that is driven by the advances in semiconductors that led to personal computing in 70s and 80s and the internet in the 90s. So most of us in the audience today, we have lived in this third industrial revolution, seen the world change around us. Now, since this is a topic on higher education, I would say the impact of the third industrial revolution on higher ed has been significant. Early in the 90s, 1993, I believe it was, the famous MIT professor and educational technologist, Seymour Papert, who was the founder with Martin Minsky of the Artificial Intelligence Lab at MIT, he suggested that a teacher from the 19th century transported into the mid-1990s would feel very much at home in the classroom. Well, that was early 90s when the digital technologies were just beginning to impact higher ed. This is no longer true today. our students are digital natives. They have not just changed incrementally from those of the past, like us. According to Mark Prensky, another thought leader, this is a real big discontinuity that has taken place. It's a singularity, an event that changes things at a fundamental level, and there is no going back. So the students today are digital natives. They think and process information very differently than us. And this technology has impacted curriculum as much as it has impacted the pedagogy. So I'm not trying to suggest in any way that we are in a post-digital world, not at all. But these are the three, and roughly with the years and times, in response to your question.
Thank you. So from what I've been gleaning from the literature and discussions around the fourth industrial revolution, and you've said basically a revolution is a dramatic change, but there seems to be something extraordinary about the fourth industrial revolution. Can you elaborate briefly sort of what might set the fourth industrial revolution, not just the technologies, but sort of the character of the change that might be different than the prior revolutions?
Yeah, so each industrial revolution, except for the first, is building on the previous one, right? And so the impact, broadly speaking, is compounded. It literally is because you're building. So the fourth industrial revolution is building primarily on the third, the automation and digital world. And you know how that has impacted society. As I said, it's not that we are in a post-digital world, by no means. And how it continues to drive things remains to be seen. One thing that Schwab in his book notes, and he says that one of the important characteristics is related to the velocity of change, the breadth and depth of change, and the system's impact. So by velocity, we are referring to the developments that are happening or will happen, are occurring at a rate much faster than before. And this is due to the internet and the interconnectedness of societies and countries and so forth. So anything that we publish here in the US is instantly available in Hong Kong and India and China and vice versa. So knowledge is being shared instantaneously. On top of that, the linear growth of human knowledge has now translated to an exponential growth. Depending on who you believe and what predictions, it's growing exponentially. It's doubling in years and so forth. So this is really driving change in a much faster way. Breadth and depth, these technologies and the combination of technologies, it is not simply changing how we are manufacturing or making automation faster. It is actually changing economies, businesses, societies, and people. So there's a much broader footprint, if you will, of the impact. And finally, the systems impact, which he also talks about, is it's likely to impact systems within societies and across societies at every level. That is the case as we look at how the third industrial revolution of digital and automation, it has impacted society and people in significant ways. So it is quite likely that the systems impact of the fourth industrial revolution is going to have a similar and probably a magnified effect.
Thank you. Yeah, one of your points about the speed of the transformation and how it's becoming more rapid with time, how it's becoming more rapid every year, reminds me of one of your first comments when you were on campus about the university needing to move at the speed of students. And so I think in many ways that sort of resonates with this discussion. One thing too that I want to just sort of throw out there and as more of a clarifying point, the fourth industrial revolution, which we're talking about now, I've often seen the term industry 4.0, and they seem to be very much connected. So can you give us a sense of the relationship or how they're different or how they're similar? That might be just good for everybody to get a grounding in the terminology being used these days.
Sure, but let me digress just for a moment to talk about U of M-Flint at the speed of students. I mean, it is something that I'm very passionate about. In the simplest of terms, this phrase refers to a fast response to student needs. But it is not only limited to students, it's an institutional response at a faster pace, because we are in a world that is moving at a fast pace. And I'm using students because they come to institutions expecting a high quality education and a variety of services, right? So this requires many things, many components, might very well be in the back office. You don't see directly, but all of these components to work at speed and in tandem so that the overall system response is fast as it can be. And placing it in the context of students, it does make sense because, as I said, they are digital natives. They are used to things at a much different pace. So we have to think about that. And it's not just using technology, the latest of the technology, that is needed, but you've got to look at simplifying institutional processes. So once you simplify and update and modernize institutional processes and marry that with the latest in technology, that makes the institution move at the speed of students. So it requires us to understand the students and their lifestyle, and it requires us to look very closely, carefully at our own processes, which might have been developed over the last 30, 40 years and hasn't quite changed because it's in the back office, so it's that. Okay, so back to our topic. The fourth industrial revolution is indeed used interchangeably with Industry 4.0. Yeah, it is the case. But Industry 4.0 is an initiative that appeared in Germany between, I'd say, 2011 and 2015. That's the time period. And it was focusing pretty much on the application of digital technologies to manufacturing and production. That was the German initiative. So like digital manufacturing, which is one of our majors in the College of Innovation and Technology. However, since then, Industry 4.0 and Fourth Industrial Revolutions are used interchangeably. They actually, Industry 4.0 is more focused on the technologies that industry is dealing with, whereas Fourth Industrial Revolution is a much broader framework for policy and other conversations that include the Industry 4.0. But it is very likely that Industry 4.0 will be used interchangeably, or referring sometimes to really industry issues, but sometimes to Fourth Industrial Revolution. It's similar to what we oftentimes say interchangeably. We say entrepreneurship and innovation, or innovation entrepreneurship. it goes hand in hand, but these are different, they are related. So the concept of fourth industrial revolution, as I said, is much broader, and it is truly about cyber physical systems. So you're bringing together the digital, the physical, and the biological worlds. That's the framing of Schwab in the book. And they combine and they reinforce one another. So the biological world is very key to this framing of the fourth industrial revolution. And it's an important item. The experts say that the speed of the current breakthroughs has no historical precedent, and it's true. But this is a very important item because economists will point out that the fourth industrial revolution is likely to yield greater inequality and disrupt labor markets. It is moving at such a speed that the policymakers need to, and the social scientists and the economists, they need to be at pace with them. So it is likely to lead to much greater inequality than we have now. So the future of work, the evolving future of work is a key issue to understand and prepare for. We do not quite know how this all, so we are in the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution. We don't know how it will unfold, but it is very clear that higher ed is going to play a very important role. So we should think of this as an opportunity for us.
There's certainly a lot in your answer. Maybe to get a good sense of what's ahead of us as we were in the dawn of the fourth industrial revolution, maybe we can become a little bit more concrete to get a sense of what some of those technological changes are that are emerging, and that'll help us get a better sense of a grasp on what sort of societal, large, bigger picture changes that are in store for us as we sort of deal with the disruptions that the fourth industrial revolution will bring.
So Schwab's 2016 book organizes the technologies, as I said, in three broad categories, right? Physical, biological, and digital. But another very useful schema has emerged in a very recent, a 2019 document from the World Economic Forum that describes the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution Network. So in this brochure, as now it's being shown on the screen here, the World Economic Forum organizes the emerging technologies in domains and different clusters, 9 of these as shown in the slide here. These themselves are very broad clusters, and some like AI and machine learning and drones, you hear about a lot, but many others like data policy and digital trade, maybe we hear much less in the common media, but these are all developing and proceeding at a fairly fast pace. So it's quite likely that the fourth industrial revolution will impact societal sectors across the board and globally. For example, it is likely that the US manufacturing, which relates to more than half of the corporate R&D in this country, US patents, and our country's exports, will be impacted significantly. A thriving manufacturing is very important for national security and economic prosperity. And I'll just put a plug in for our new College of Innovation and Technology. I think it's very timely in that we are looking forward to the technologies and the areas where the jobs are going to be. So the graduates from this new college will be better prepared to address these areas and actually think about how they will evolve. Let's take a couple of examples from this slide. According to the World Bank, there are about 1 billion people worldwide who suffer from some kind of disability. Could be like physical or mental, what have you. So the integration of artificial AI, artificial intelligence and machine learning, robotics, is bringing major advances to assistive technology, right? Smart glasses, cognitive hearing aids, sign to text are just a few examples. And you Google these and you will see. So these advances are not only enabling the physically and mentally challenged to lead a normal life, but also making our healthcare system much more intelligent, such that we can optimize healthcare or patient care, if you will, right context to the right person at the right time. That's what I mean by optimal healthcare. With this kind of AI and machine learning embedded, not only in assistive technology, the example which I gave, but you can think of so many areas where this can really make a big difference, and healthcare can be optimized in that sense. The AI integrated assistive technology sector is expected to generate over $25 billion in the next decade. It's a big growth area. Take another area, for example, autonomous and urban mobility. As the world population grows, which is like projected to grow about 12 to 15% in the next decade, urban transport will grow accordingly. The demand for urban transport will grow accordingly, with people spending more time in transit and a measurable increase in greenhouse gas emissions. Only yesterday, I was watching the evening news on CBS with Nora O'Donnell, and she aired the interview with Bill Gates on climate change after he wrote a new book. And Gates said that reducing greenhouse gas emission to zero is not only needed, but the challenge is bigger than anything humanity has done until now, which is, yes, absolutely. Now think of a mobility system in which automated electric vehicles, intelligent traffic systems, and predictive maintenance all work in tandem. Okay, it is like futuristic,
Right.
but that's where things are going. In Ann Arbor, so there is M-City, which is looking at autonomous driverless vehicles happening in California and so forth. So if we ultimately achieve this kind of a automated transport system, not only would it reduce per capita travel time, cost of travel, most importantly, it would lower and at some point be able to drastically reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So it's important also to note here that technology advances will not achieve these goals. It's not that if you have these vehicles and the system, you would need, and that's the reason the fourth industrial framework is so important. You would need advances in public policy and human consumer behavior changes, ride sharing, and things of that nature will become more common and will become incentivized. So the policy changes will have to be equally important and the advancement to make these things happen.
So your example of the autonomous vehicles and smart cities and driverless cars, I mean, going back to my childhood, kind of reminds me of the Jetsons or something of that nature. So I guess that brings to mind then the things that you've talked about in terms of examples. Are these distant future happenings, or are we on the cusp of them? I mean, if you could sort of look into your crystal ball, I guess, and see, what sort of technological changes and disruptions are we going to experience, and about when are they on our doorstep?
Yeah, so instead of me looking at my crystal ball, which is sort of a little fuzzy and dirty at this point, how about we look at some crowdsourced info, right? That we can get. It's available in the World Economic Forum, the website, of what people expect by 2025. So it's a survey, so it is crowdsourced. So they refer to this as the tipping points, by 2025. Some very interesting ones. The first robotic pharmacist will appear by 2025. Over 85% of the folks think, yes, that will happen. Think of 10% of the reading glasses will be connected to the internet. Again, over 85% of people think that is going to happen. How about 3D printing? First 3D printed car in production, 84%, close to 85%, that they feel it will happen. 5% of consumer products will be 3D printed. Over 80% of the people think, yes, that's likely. And here is an interesting one. It's actually scary. First transplant of a 3D printed liver in a human body. Over 75% of people think that is likely to happen. Because you have biological materials and 3D printing is well suited for that. And the advances in that area are happening very rapidly. Here's an interesting one. 30% of the corporate audits will be performed not by human, by artificial intelligence. 3/4 of the people surveyed think that is going to happen. Globally, across the world, more trips and journeys will happen via car sharing than by private cars. Over 2/3 of the people think that is likely. And let me end with a very interesting one. The first artificial intelligence machine on a corporate board of directors, 45% of the people said that is likely to happen. Well, these are projections, these are crowdsourced, but there's a lot of truth to it, that the pace that Schwab was referring to, the velocity of change, is truly remarkable. And that is because you're building on one on top of the other, so the effects are compounded. So that's where we are. That's the crystal ball from many smart people.
I don't know if you're aware, but actually one of my areas of scholarship is on looking at corporate boards and corporate governance. And so the last example you gave was pretty shocking. And 2025 is only 4 years away. So I may have to change my research design on what I'm doing. One other thing too about artificial intelligence, there's actually I think there's a Chronicle of Higher Education is having a webinar this very afternoon on AI in higher education. So clearly, the topics we're talking about now and the changes that we are discussing and foreseeing are on everybody's agenda. So one of the things that I think people, I don't know if I want to say fear, but certainly are concerned about with robotics and artificial intelligence and machine learning, I mean, corporate boards of directors might even be replaced, is this notion of a substitution of labor. That one of the big disruptions, as you mentioned, in terms of inequalities and societal changes, is going to stem from this machine versus human labor So what sort of, I think there's a book called How to Robot Proof Your Job or something of that nature. So what sort of skills and capabilities do you see that our graduates are going to need in the future to be successful in this new terrain that the fourth industrial revolution is sort of bringing us or bringing to us?
So here my response will be of special interest to you as Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences that is organizing LLE. Look, the technological innovations have real potentials, as we have seen already, to displace workers. But the workers need new skills, right? But there are existing skill sets, if you will, if you allow me to call that, that will continue to be in demand. Absolutely. Here are a couple of charts from the 2020 Future of Jobs report from SAME, the World Economic Forum. And if you look at it, you see, as I was saying, that critical thinking and analysis, the foundation of a liberal education, problem-solving skills, working with people, collaboration, management and communication of activities, core literacies, fundamental knowledge in basic areas. So these are still there and will continue to be there. Now, if you come to the top 15 skills by 2025, you'll see a good match, a very good match, analytical thinking and innovation. Don't worry about the ordering of the skills. I don't think that matters. It's very subjective. But you see like critical thinking and analysis, complex problem solving, leadership and social influence, emotional intelligence, resilience and stress tolerance. These are all things that a student in a liberal arts institution like ours, it was founded as a liberal arts institution and still is. It's at the very core. So when you have our professional schools getting the advantage of the first couple of years, they really are in a very good situation. So all of these things, the majority of what I read is in the domain of the College of Arts and Sciences. So I think, simply put, the liberal arts education will continue to be essential, I would say, to the jobs of the future. The technologies will change and we would need our graduates to be lifelong learners such that they can update and change the professional skills. But the core of the liberal arts will continue to be there and serve them very well.
Well, thank you very much. And certainly, I'm very much a proponent of the value of liberal arts education. One of the things that I tell incoming students when I had the opportunity to meet with them during orientation and talk a little bit about general education was that one of the goals of our general education program was to foster creative thinking. And I said, this is not just about being in an art class or a music class, but all disciplines. For you to be successful, you need to be a creative thinker. You need to be able to think in new ways about problems if you're going to be able to solve the problems we're facing in any discipline. So thank you very much for that comment. I want to move a little bit, go back to sort of one of the themes of the discussions of this session, is to really sort of dig deeper into this relationship between innovation and entrepreneurship. You mentioned that they're related, but I want to make sure that that we have a firm grasp, and then also too, what can our institutions of higher education, what is their role in promoting that relationship or fostering that relationship so that good things come out of that.
Yeah, sure. So this allows me to pick up on the comment I made earlier when we we're talking about fourth industrial revolution and industry 4.0. I made the comment that's very similar to entrepreneurship and innovation. They are related, but they are not exactly the same. So several years ago, I led a National Academy of Engineering study on this particular topic. And we published a report that now you're seeing on the screen, Educate to Innovate, okay? And the focus was this. We came into this project trying to understand whether the engineering curriculum in the United States is producing or will be able to produce meet the needs of innovators of this nation, right? So what we did, it was a study funded by the National Science Foundation and done by the National Academy of Engineering. We selected 60 innovators, and you see them on the screen, or not all 60 of them, just a sampling of them. And you see, it's very interesting. It's the folks who I'm showing. So Tim Cook from Apple, Yo-Yo Ma. Then you have Nobel laureates in the screen. And then you have this skateboarder. You have Jad Abumrad from NPR. So, and then you have faculty members as well and industrialists. So it was a very eclectic group of 60 that our steering committee considered as innovators, not necessarily technical innovators. And the conversation with Yo-Yo Ma was fascinating. I just remember that it was so wonderful conversation. We had John Hennessy, then the president of Stanford University and so forth. And what we did essentially is to ask them, please reflect on your upbringing from childhood and your career. And would you try to identify factors that led to you becoming the innovator that you are? You know, it was a set of 8 or 10 questions. And soon after we reached saturation and then we moved on to some new question. It was a fascinating study to speak to these people and for Tim Cook to give us an hour in his busy schedule. I mean, but it also goes to prove how important they thought that innovation is to the nation. And then we had about 750, 800 pages that we put together, we consolidated. In this, we framed innovation as follows. So on the left-hand side, you see is a discovery. So I'm here referring to scientific advances, basic science advances. And on the extreme right is what it shows. It's written as market, but here is where we are referring to entrepreneurship. In the middle is where you've taken the basic scientific advance to solve an open problem, an unmet need. And it's a societal problem, and its impact really ought to be on the society. So that's why going to market and impacting the society is a key part of it. So that's how we framed. And in our analysis, we found that there are educational programs, of course, in scientific discovery, in physics, chemistry, maths, biology, so on and so forth. And you have entrepreneurship programs in business schools and engineering schools, but there really wasn't anything that taught you how to innovate. It just wasn't there. And then the question became, can that be taught or not? Well, based on the responses from these 60 people, here is how we define the relationship between innovation and entrepreneurship, okay? So entrepreneurship is taking something to market and making it very successful. So what we are saying is entrepreneurship is not necessarily based on an innovation. It doesn't have to be. It realizes the value of innovation. It sometimes follows innovation, and other times it leads to innovation. So there was a clear agreement among folks that these are two very related things, but they were not the same. And we did not want to define what it is. We chose to leave it there just to say that they are related, and through examples, you will see how the relationship is. Based on the 750, 800 pages of interview transcript, I'll try to summarize it in 2 slides. What we found out is this, that the innovators have certain skills to begin with. Each of us have our innate skills, but they have also had certain experiences that have allowed them to improve on those skills. And the other is they have had the opportunity or the privilege to be in certain environments that then translated to experiences, that then translated to skills. So we tried to capture it in this way. And there's a lot in that report, but I'll share with you some findings. And here again, I ask you to see, you won't see anything technical here, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the kind of thing that you refer to. Discourage the fear of failure. Having role models. These are real people who are successful innovators saying these were factors. Now, like physical spaces, it's a very interesting thing. We just opened the Murchie extension and we said so many times that you have the collaborative spaces. Exactly. That is what is needed. You want people, you want faculty, students, staff to gather. And then you create the environment for conversation and problem solving. And these were important things that came out of that study. Promote creativity and passion. This goes all the way down to K-12. And several of the innovators said, yes, the creativity of a kid is observable, and you need to, so some have been in those environments where high school teachers, middle school like teachers, they promoted that. And those innovators remembered it, even though they are now 60, 70, 80, they remembered that elementary school. I still remember how nice it was because it allowed me to be who I am. And then you can talk about, or like we can spend a lot of time addressing, is our educational system, is U of M-Flint educational system organized around discouraging the fear of failure? When we fail in a project, you don't give them a good grade, right? So they understand that failing in a project is not good. But to be an innovator, you need to learn from you fail and you cannot discourage. So there are certain inherent like conflicts here, but it was very interesting. So the report has a lot of it, but I will say that innovation has always flourished in the world, in every part of the world. Humans have and continue to innovate in every technological and social fields imaginable. So in many ways, one might say that innovation is a part of the human DNA. And it has played a vital role in building strong, diversified economies that offer amazing opportunities to its citizens. Since I'm reading Jill Lepore and I'm reading about the history of the country. One of the greatest American innovation is the land grant university that Diane Harris, who came from Mellon, she spoke about. So every state has a land grant university. In the state of Michigan, it's Michigan State. The concept of land grant university was proposed by Senator Justin Morrill from Vermont. And in the middle of the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln signed it. Just think about it. And the concept is very simple. Those days, higher education was the privy of the elite. You had all the Ivy League schools in the East Coast and so forth. And they understood that you need access. You need to open access to higher education for the non-elites. And in order to do so, you need to create institutions in every state. And the concept was that the federal government, the federal lands would be given, a parcel of land would be given to a state. And it does not have to be in your own state. You could get a land in a different state. And the sales of those land would yield the proceeds that would go to founding the land grant institution. And one of the things was that it would promote the mechanical arts, so engineering and technology and agriculture. So that's the basis of a land grant institution, agriculture and engineering. And look at what it has done. So every state has one, and then there was a second land grant bill and so forth. But this beautiful concept, it changed the country forever. If you just take any innovation that came out of land grant institutions in the last 154 years, and you integrate over that, and you see the impact, I think it's the biggest innovation that this country has ever had. If you just look at the impact it has had. So the point of it is we cannot take, in the 21st century, the innovation capacity for granted. Our study has shown that now more than ever, we need future innovators to discover, hone in their talents, and enhance the country's and the world's capacity for innovation. And it has shown that education at all levels is the key. So let me stop right there.
Okay. We're actually getting close to the end of our discussion time so that we have enough time for questions. So I want to consider the future of higher education in light of everything we've talked about. The breadth, the velocity, the breadth and depth of the fourth industrial revolution's changes, the velocity of it, the speed of it. In reflecting on these trends that are happening in the fourth industrial revolution, what do you think are the biggest challenges for higher education? Like you say, we have to adapt. We've got to be in the discussion points about the speed of students, that it's not just meeting needs, but it's institutional changes. What do you think we have to do as an institution of higher education in light of these changes of the fourth industrial revolution?
So there are many challenges, and each challenge is actually a new opportunity. So let me mention a few that are emerging at the intersection of this technological change at the unprecedented rate and scope and the future of higher education. We already talked about how digital technologies impacted higher education. The industry is moving towards skills over degree model. It's very clear. Because at the end of the day, they are validating the credential that we give to our students. You do a 4-year degree and you get a bachelor's of communication. Wherever you go to work, they are expecting that diploma to be to convey certain skills. So I am seeing more and more that it is becoming very explicit that degree or no degree, I need this kind of a skill set. So this challenges the conventional route for all universities that we are developing degrees every time we get an opportunity. So we need to be nimble and respond to the needs of the student and the companies that hire them with flexible options and so forth. The second point is the increasing need for lifelong learning in a nonlinear world. The education model that we have is sort of front-loaded. You do like your 12 years of schooling, and then you do 4 years or 6 years of education, and then used to be, and Flint should know this better than anybody else, you get a job and you're done for life. That model is no longer. It is no longer, education cannot ever be just front-loaded. You've got to be engaged in education throughout your career simply because new knowledge is being produced at a much faster pace, making previous knowledge obsolete. It's just becoming obsolete. So now this lifelong learning the burden is on the individual. You don't necessarily have to come back to school, or you have to learn, whether you are in a part of a knowledge circle or so forth. So what this makes clear is that in formal education, an emphasis on the process of learning is just as important to the mastery of content. Oftentimes we focus and reward mastery of content. But what I'm saying is that process of learning going forward, even now, is equally important. So we need to find ways to make sure that students get that and appreciate that and understand that, because the content is going to change. The evolving needs and expectations of so-called student consumer, they come to universities, they pay tuition and fees, and they get something in return which stays with them. So the number of adult learners will soon overtake or has in many ways, if you factor in the lifelong learning, the traditional 18 to 24-year-olds in higher education. So lifelong learning need to fit different lifestyles and circumstances, and higher ed has to address the adult learner more and more than what it has in the past. And adult learners come with different needs and constraints. They require more flexibility and so forth. So we need to understand that. Finally, I'll say the emerging technologies and business models, the use of technology will keep on increasing. And we have to find ways to meet them and meet the needs of future students, whether it is using AI to grade papers and help in recitation sections, or it is models. You think of Amazon University, where you get to try out different courses at no cost, and then when you think you like it, so you already are seeing Coursera and opportunities like that, which are bringing like courses from best institutions and making it available to you. So it is happening. But I'd like to end by saying that the 4-year degree for 18 to 24-year-olds is very important. That is not going to go away. What I was referring to is the emerging market in other sectors, especially in Michigan. As you know, the 18 to 24-year-old market is decreasing, out migration and folks having less kids. The pedagogy and curricula will need to be updated frequently. and the degree and the graduate both have to be relevant to the employer, to the industry, to the society and the world. Finally, the technological changes always bring about societal changes and new important questions, big questions that are the drivers of a liberal education, they emerge. So for example, does the rise of artificial intelligence place into question what it means to be human? I think, therefore I am, right? What does it mean in the world of artificial intelligence? What is human life if we can print livers and tissue with 3D printing? The ethical questions that surround it are huge. How do we quite literally navigate a terrain that is dominated by autonomous vehicles? And who bears the responsibility when something goes wrong? And with Internet of Things and advances in facial recognition, audio, video, like the surveillance, where are the lines? And what are the lines of privacy? And that we are already beginning to see in the TV and social media. I mean, it is causing havoc when things can just be made up. So such questions will, I believe, underscore the importance of a liberally educated individual who is prepared not just with content knowledge, but has the ability to critically think, contextualize, and synthesize information across disciplinary boundaries to advance human understanding and human condition. So ethics, politics, sociology, languages, and communications are just as much as important in the fourth industrial revolution as are robotics, AI, and machine learning. These are not one over the other. They need to be taken in tandem, and students need to understand the broader context. So the Liberal Arts Foundation of UM-Flint, it positions our new College of Innovation and Technology rather uniquely to educate innovators and technologists who have the combination of such kind of skills and experiences. And I'm sure you'll hear more from Dean Chris Pearson and Provost, and also our Dean of CAS, like Dean Susan Gano-Phillips.
Thank you so much, Chancellor. This has been fantastic. We have about 15 minutes, 20 minutes for questions. Nick has been monitoring the questions in the chat. So I guess we should begin with that. Nick, anything that we want to bring to our attention here?
Yeah, we have a few great questions, and I'll just continue to encourage people to put your questions in the chat. We'll try to get to all of them. But this first one goes back to that second slide. In terms of the 9 clusters, where does UM-Flint's CIT plan to position itself as a leader?
So repeat that again. I didn't get it.
Yes. In terms of the 9 clusters here on this slide, where does the new College of Innovation and Technology plan to position itself as a leader?
Well, right now, I would say it is going to be, so we are still just getting started. Our programs will be straddling, if I may use the term, areas 1, 6, and 8. So we are starting out with digital manufacturing, information technology, and informatics. But we will be looking at AI and machine learning. We will be looking at mobility. We will be looking at robotics. So it might not fit exactly in one of these, but it will be a combination. And you'll hear more on this from Dean Chris Pearson.
Great. And another College of Innovation and Technology question here. Will the clinical laboratory science program that trains the medical laboratory technicians to run machines to analyze patient samples for new diagnosis of disease be included in the College of Innovation and Technology?
So this will probably be the case as we develop. So we are looking at programs in biotechnology and healthcare technologies for the future. And I do believe, although I'm not in the field, I do believe that the lab science will be a part of these programs. But the experts need to weigh in.
And here's another one. In regards to meeting the needs of budding innovators, is there a safety net for blue sky research and failure?
Well, again, in the survey that we did of the innovators, they didn't speak of safety nets actually. But I do understand the importance of safety nets. I do. So it's, every failure is an opportunity to learn and improve on the curve that ultimately leads to innovation. So if you know that you have a safety net, if you know that you will not fail, or if you fail, somebody is going to bail you out, that really isn't what we heard from the innovators we spoke to. The consequences were real. They came out of it with better innovation, but the consequences were real. Now, in a university setting or such kind of environment, maybe we can design something that would address the safety net, or at least give some safety net. But learning from failure with the knowledge of a safety net, I don't think is what is being referred to.
Yes. Associate Dean Barnes.
Yeah, may I add something to this conversation? I think in some ways, one thing that struck me, Chancellor, was that the opportunities and privilege that your respondents sort of mentioned in their formative years as being so important for their being innovative. And so what I'm thinking is, how can we, not just as an institution of higher education, I certainly think there are roles for us in this project, but how do we, maybe even as a society, and maybe this goes back to that safety net. It's not necessarily a safety net of sort of a welfare state type safety net, but rather a safety net of opportunity and security. Let me call it security, that you are able to take those risks, right? And yeah, there are consequences to failure for sure, but how do we move beyond that fixed mindset, or the valuing the lessons of failure? If your very livelihood is at stake, it's hard to take risks, right? And so how do we as a society create the conditions that's going to help us innovate, help us provide security for our citizens in a way that can move us forward, to help us buffet or deal with the challenges and disruptions of the fourth industrial revolution?
Yeah, one might say it's very easy for a successful innovator to say that, yes, I took risk and there were days when I didn't know if I would get out of it or not. Yeah, you can look back and say, but there are many people who actually did not succeed. So, um, but Roy, it's a very important question. I don't have an answer, and I've often thought that our educational system, um, okay, it's beyond educational system. Most things in society that we live in, it promotes success. If you succeed, you are rewarded. If you write a proposal to NSF, if it is good, you are rewarded. If it's not good, or you didn't fare as well as others in the pool, you're not rewarded. Um, how do we change this? I don't know.
Mhm.
I do not know. But I think this is something we and in the academic institutions can think about. As you mentioned, how can we uh, how can we absorb some of the risks, but actually still have the students or the people engaged in the process learn from the failure. So
Yeah.
I'm open to ideas from other people. I just don't know.
We have a few more I want to get to quickly. There's a comment, two comments that I'll just kind of put into one in regards to land grant universities. From one perspective, that's an innovative move. From another, it's oppressive, as we know, more than 250 tribal nations had their lands appropriated
Yes.
for those land grant universities. And I think maybe that speaks to, in a different way as well, perhaps the different value we could take from this liberal arts kind of infusion into entrepreneurship as well. So
Yes,
maybe
yes.
you speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing the comment by Vicky Larson. Absolutely. That is the history. Um, and there are many things that have happened which over time people have reflected back and saw how improper it was. And land grant has that black mark to it. I agree. I'm not, but the fact of the matter, the impact it made on the country, the impact it made on each state by having that kind of a university, and it essentially opened up uh, like public higher education, which up until then was pretty much the privy of the elites. So there is a dark side to it. I agree, but you cannot um, n- neglect that it was an innovation that came during the Civil War, right in the middle of the Civil War, when the country needed to heal and needed to think about agriculture, needed to think about engineering or mechanical production. And that's what the land grant universities did for the nation.
One of the things I really enjoy about this series is we're able to bring together folks from the campus and the larger community that we work with through entrepreneurship. And this next question kind of speaks to that. How might small businesses leverage emerging technology so they're not left behind?
Well, exactly. So the Office of Research and Economic Development should be, as you are doing, organizing events of this nature in consultation after hearing from small to medium businesses, such that we can come together, the university, state like MEDC, and small businesses, to actually inform each other of advances and open areas where things need to make um, where things need to happen. So I think we do have that capability. And I would say that ORED, Office of Economic Development within ORED, and Office of Research should work together to make it happen. I mean, that is one of the values or the contributions a regional public university is supposed to make to the region.
The last question we have here is a pretty long one, and if I can just pull what I think is the heart of it out. To some extent, can you help define, and perhaps you can't at this time, but if you can define Klaus Schwab's statement that the fourth industrial revolution will benefit the stakeholder and not the shareholder? And does this simply mean, well, I think that larger question might be more relevant.
Yeah, well, by stakeholder, what he is referring to is the stakeholders as in society that benefits from the good that comes out of the advancement. And whereas the shareholder is the people or the corporations who actually made it happen. So the good of, it's his hypothesis, and we'll see if that really happens. The benefits will not be realized by a few, but it will be broadly for the society. I mean, that's how I took it.
There's certainly as well been a movement within corporate governance about stakeholder capitalism as opposed to shareholder capitalism. And in a way, it's very much in line with what we've been talking about in the terms of the broader implications of the fourth industrial revolution, that when thinking about innovation and thinking about change, you need to think about the implications, you need to think about societal impact, you need to think about climate change. And so I think this concept of stakeholder capitalism is very much trying to broaden our frame of reference when we are thinking about change moving forward.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say is it's a framework. It's a framework from a group or an individual who is a thought leader. And I think it's open for all of us in this forum and so many other forums to actually discuss, debate, and make improvements as we see fit. So through events of this sort, we can see where improvements are needed or arguments need to be finessed. So it is something that is evolving, but having a broad framework is very beneficial. It brings technologies together with policymakers, experts in ethics, and society at large. So that is certainly a benefit of having a framework like the one that has been put forth.
But unfortunately, I think our time is up. This has been a fantastic conversation, and it's a perfect way to launch this series. So again, just a quick plug for upcoming events. We have the March event with Dean Pearson and Provost Feast Pierce, with a bit more of a focus on the College of Innovation and Technology. But since I will be hosting that conversation, promoting that conversation, rest assured we'll get some liberal learning and liberal arts into that conversation because it is so important. And then in April, we'll have the Dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, Susan Gano-Phillips, to talk a little bit more directly about the students and what we need to do to support our students as we move forward. So I'd like to thank everybody. I'd like to thank the Chancellor, Nick Custer, Paula Nass and her office for all your support, and wish everybody a good afternoon.
Thank you very much.